Good evening, everybody. Welcome along this evening. My name is Kevin Lynch, and I'm a coastal geomorphologist from the Geography Department in NUIG Galway. The talk this evening is targeted at, is aimed at people that are new to this idea of nature-based solutions. So in particular, it's targeted at the general public and community groups that are interested in getting involved in climate action. And although we have people attending from maybe around the world, or we definitely had some checking in from the UK, the talk is really focused primarily on Ireland. But obviously the nature-based solutions are applicable everywhere, and you'll see some of the examples from different places around the world. It's also very much focused on the coast and solutions for the coast. So that really because I'm a coastal person, and that's where I like to work. So there are two particular coastal issues I'm going to look at, but I'll also give some examples from other areas as well. And that's just to give you a feeling that nature-based solutions can be applied widely. So the talk today is, I'm going to look at, so we're talking about solutions to what are the problems that we're looking at, and give you an idea of some of those, and the fact that there are quite a lot of different types of problems that we can tackle with nature-based solutions. And then I'll move into some examples of what nature-based solutions are, and then I'll give two very specific ones for a coastal setting, and hopefully go into just enough depth that you'll understand some of the science behind it, but not too much that you'll get lost or whatever. So the target really is for people new to this and with no experience in it beforehand. And then the last thing I'll talk about for a little bit, I've only a couple of slides on it, are issues with switching to nature-based solutions. So it's not a straightforward process to go from something that we've been doing for the last 50 years to something new. So there are definitely issues with switching. Okay, so what are we talking about here? We're talking about complex problems facing society, and these could be, there could be a whole range of these, but one very clear example would be, that's a very, they've called it a wicked problem, is climate change. And this is especially important these days, and climate change impacts and storm frequency around the Irish coast. We're very aware of the increase in storm frequency and intensity. So if Bono is shouting about it, you know, maybe it's something we should sit up and listen to. Although some people, they're not too fond of Bono for whatever reason, I don't know, and maybe they mightn't even believe in climate change, but that doesn't mean that we can't look at these and come up with different types of solutions, because we do have coastal erosion occurring, that's without a doubt. And these are two examples from England, but right across Ireland over the last 10 years, we have seen ample examples of coastal erosion being a problem. And whatever about Bono, another Northsider, Theresa Mannion, has made sure that everyone in this country is aware of what serious problems coastal storms are now. And here's just an example from some flooding in Salt Hill during the 2013-14 storms. So there's clearly a problem with the hazards. We have things that are causing problems, but there's also problems with the way we have tried to address these. And so this is kind of what the talk is about, that the way we have looked at this up to date hasn't been good enough, and we need to look at different types of solutions. So I'll just go through two examples that are kind of broadly, everybody would be aware of. Flooding. So the issues of too much water. I'll look at too little water in a second. Flooding is certainly an issue. And the traditional approaches to flooding are maybe part of some of the problems that we have as well, and the knock-on effects from these problems. So when we have heavy rainfall events inland, across the landscape, we get this influx of water into our channel network. And in some cases, the floodplains and where the floodplains were, we built on those, and that's a problem as well. So it's not just our solutions, it's the fact that maybe in the past our planning wasn't what it should have been. There's also issues with land use change. So, we know that we have changed the landscape over the last 50 years, over the last 100 years, 200 years. We've moved from, a primarily forested country to a wide open landscape that supports a lot of agriculture. So that's also an issue. But what I want to show here are maybe the problems with our solutions to these. So when we have too much water and it's arriving in the river network, you may think the logical thing to do is, okay, just move it as fast as you can away from this site, and then it won't be a problem. And so this has been the traditional approach. So this example up here in the top left, this is what we call channelization, whereby we try to channel the water away as fast as possible. So we make the rivers and streams straighter. So if they're not meandering and slowing the water down, if we straighten them, the water will move fast. We put concrete sides on them, high, and we widen the bed and deepen the bed. And again, this is all in an attempt to move the water as fast as possible away from the site that the flooding is occurring. And in doing this, then what we do is we take out all of these things that slow the water. So this type of geodiversity, the diversity in the river shape and form. So this is an example from the Danube, a section of the Danube where it has been straightened, and all of these old parts of the channel and slow parts of the channel have been taken out. So the idea is just move the water on as quickly as you can. The problem then is, okay, you're moving the water on as quickly as you can from one location, it just arrives faster in some other location. And so this is a picture from the Shannon where it's downstream of a particular site that has had channelization, that straightening of the channels that move the water as quick as we can. And so it arrives somewhere else. So this is a knock-on effect of our solution. We're only thinking of one small section, not the bigger picture. Other effects then are, like I mentioned, the loss of geodiversity, the loss of habitats. So all of those different types of shapes within the river all supported different specialized species and plants, which gave us these niche habitats. And any of these that haven't been removed, if they're in the stream and they begin to grow again, then they're removed periodically. And what they provided would have been shade and food for the fish and the invertebrates and other things living in the river. So now they've no shade, they've no areas to rest. So in a section of the river where you might have a pool that slows the water down, it would be a place for fish to rest. And so it makes it very difficult for species to live in the river and fish to live in the river. And a very clear example then of the effect, or these knock-on effects, these unexpected, these surprises. Oh, we didn't expect that to happen, that we lost our salmon species, or salmon numbers are going down. Well, actually, when you think of the bigger picture and you look at a lot more variables other than simply, well, can we afford it? Okay, if we can afford it, let's do it. You have these knock-on effects. So our salmon stocks have got to the point that they're a real problem in right across the world. And it's not just to do with this. This is just that. Sorry, somebody's not on mute there. Could you possibly mute?
9 o'clock is your bedtime. No, not 9. Close the door.
Myself. Okay, so the low salmon stocks is just one indicator of other problems and lack of biodiversity in our rivers and loss of habitat. So that's really a problem. Another example then is where we have too little water. So again, the answer seems to be very simple and straightforward. This is an example from the Colorado River. And here the problem is that they have a lot of rainfall and water at certain times of the year, and it's an arid region and it moves off very quickly. So just dam it, keep the water in one place, and then you have water for the rest of the year. Dams are also used for controlling floodwaters as well. So that's another reason that they're built. And this is only a selection of a few of the dams on the Colorado River. There's, I think, about 30 or 40 in total. And the problem with that is not alone do you block up the water and store it in one area, but downstream, you're taking water out of the system that would have moved downstream. And so this is the river delta where the river meets the sea. And for a period of something like 7 or 9 years, the Colorado River didn't actually even flow into the sea. There was so little water at the coming into the lower reaches of the river system. And you can imagine if you're an aquatic species living in a river, this is not good. It also, in that particular scenario, it flows from the US into Mexico. So it actually crosses an international border. In other places in the world, it can also be an international, have an international aspect. And so people think that this may actually be a reason that wars break out in the future. In the near future, it sounds like at this stage. Some of the other effects then of these dams, if we look here at the top section, this is the one without the dam. What you see here is the free movement of, again, salmon moving upstream. So they can freely move from the open ocean upstream and find these beds for laying their eggs and regenerating the stocks. The water here is whatever depth that it's not too deep that it's turbulent and churns around, and by doing that it's well oxygenated. It's also, the temperature is quite well regulated right across it. Sediment is also free to move down the river. So when you dam it, here's the dam down here at the bottom. What ends up happening is some of the knock-on effects are that the water that builds up behind the dam, the water at the top, if you're in an arid area, becomes very hot. The water down at the bottom then is a lot colder. You have evaporation off the surface. You also have pollutants coming down the river, just building up at this point. So water quality goes down as well. And then below the dam, because there isn't sediment coming down, you might have erosion taking place here. So here the riverbed is being cut away. And then the sediment isn't available to go on to the sea either. So there's lots of other effects there, but I don't want to dwell on them too much. The part, as a coastal scientist, the part that's of interest is the amount of sediment that's dammed up behind, or that's impounded behind the dams. And if we look at across Europe, the number of dams that have been built over the past 30 or 40 years, you know, there's just an incredible amount of dams. These are the gray ones are smaller, and then you get up into the bigger ones in the red, and black then being the biggest one. I don't see anyone in black there. But as a coastal geomorphologist, what I look at that and I see, well, surely coastal erosion is a problem. And of course, coastal erosion is a problem right across Europe. So although this isn't the only reason, it's certainly one of the factors. So if you're preventing sediment going down to the coast, moving along the coast and building up as a buffer to storm events, you have no buffer when the storms come, and the land itself becomes eroded quite easily. So that's another knock-on effect from building dams. And these are just two examples. We could also look at many other examples from across society and the things that we're struggling with. Food production, lack of fish stocks in the sea dwindling, you know, so we're moving over to aquaculture. There are knock-on effects to that. Transport, how we move around, how we create our energy, and the impacts of that. Urbanization, the big influx of people to cities and rural depopulation. mass tourism. All of these really require a long-term multidisciplinary type of approach to think about how to solve these problems. And often that's not the case. Simple, quick solutions are usually looked for. So some of the just to kind of summarize some of these existing approaches and what the problems are with them. The absolute essence of them, of most of them, is that we're trying to control nature. So we're saying, here's a problem, we can control nature. We're lord and masters of the planet. If there's a storm event and it's moving water on land, we can build a wall and stop that happening. If we have too little water, we can build a dam and stop that. So we're trying to control nature. Quick fixes. So these are, okay, so they're not exactly quick, but they're easy enough in the space of a couple of years to design and build. They're very costly. Coastal protection works, those dams, things like that, they're very costly and they're very expensive to maintain over long periods of time. There are simple fixes in that it's easy to understand them. It's easy to sell them to people. So if you're a politician and you want to get re-elected, I'll build you a wall or a dam, and then the dam appears and you can see something concrete and you go, oh, look what he did for us, and you go and elect that guy again. Yeah, that's pretty straightforward and simple. Of course, then you have community groups for the next 30 years trying to come up with solutions for all these knock-on effects. So they may seem simple on the surface, but then when you go look at the background and the knock-on effects, they're not quite so simple. And they're very often very technical fixes. So they usually don't involve community input. They're left to the experts, and the experts maybe are expert in only one thing. They're not expert in looking at the wider development of a particular area or how we could do things better. So, and they're also based on easily quantifiable things. So what we can say is when we move on, so I'm moving on now to nature-based solutions, and rather than giving a definition of this, I think that the way to think about it is very simply, instead of controlling nature, what we should be trying to do is working with nature. And so it's just a good touchstone to come back to. If you ever look at a decision and you're thinking, well, is that a nature-based solution, or what type of solution is that? Just think, is it working with nature? Is it, you don't have to be in harmony with nature, but is it in some way thinking about nature and trying to work with the processes that are going on? So that's essentially what nature-based solutions are. Again, if we just go back to the salmon example, here we have the River Skern, and this had been channelized over a long period of time and urbanized, so it's an urban area. You can see the straightened channels and the canals of this particular system. And that was the traditional approach. And for this particular river, because of all these knock-on effects and impacts, they decided to do a restoration program. And so what they did was they brought back into the system these natural processes. So processes of flooding. So they let the river flood in this flood basin. They brought back wetlands, so they had areas to flood. They brought back these natural meander bends and these tributaries where there's less flow in the river. And so they essentially created new habitats or restored habitats. And a very simple indicator of whether it worked or not is the use of salmon spawning as an indicator. So salmon isn't the be all and end all of everything. It's a good indicator if things are working or not. So here you see the period of time when they had very few salmon. And in some years, they were saying you could count on one hand the salmon going up the river. They use electrofishing to count the numbers. So they just zap the water whilst the salmon are passing and they count them. Seemingly the salmon don't mind it, I don't know. So after the restoration, here's the restoration period here, 99, I think it was, salmon numbers began to increase. And here they are up to 1,200, up in the 1,000 kind of figures. And then I had a look the other day to see where they are now. So this paper that was reporting on this was published in 2007. By 2017, the numbers were up to 3,500. And they were predicting for the following year that they would go up to 5,000. So that's a really good example, just a simple example of how we could revert back to working with nature and see benefits of it straight away. Okay, so over to the coastal setting and some examples from the coastal setting. This is the next few slides is from this seminal paper. So this is a very important paper and has been widely cited from 2013. There are many others as well, but just to give you an idea that this paper talks about ecosystem-based approaches. It doesn't use the term nature-based solutions. So there are lots of terms and jargon in academia, and you know, it's one of the problems as well that people always try and come up with these new terms and then it becomes a fad for a while. But they're the same things: ecosystem based, looking after the ecosystem, working with the ecosystem, looking at the wider picture. And you hear other things that are quite connected to this as well, things like natural capital accounting, ecosystem goods and services, living shoreline. So there are a lot of things to get your head around, but if you think back to just, is it working with natural processes? That's the bit that we're looking for. So here's a few examples from a coastal setting. In the top one here, we have a city. So this area in gray here is a city, and it formerly had wetlands out here, and it has been altered. And then we have ecosystem-based solutions. So I look at this one first, and then we look at a dune setting. So this is a beach here and some dunes, and how traditional versus maybe some of these newer nature-based solutions or ecosystem-based solutions would look. So we look at this conventional coastal engineering one first. If you look at this, don't try and understand the slide for a second. Just the simple part of it is that you have an urban area here and an urban area here that you know, people wanted to protect. So it might have been that they tried to protect this area in the first place, and as you begin to protect an area, then the next door say, hey, what about us? We need to be protected as well. And so the hard engineering or these sea walls begin to migrate out along the coast as if by magic. Usually it's in a step process. So it's can we afford it? Yeah, but only to here. Okay, there's a problem here now. Can we afford it? Yeah, a few years later. And that's the way it works. But just to show you that these defenses look like this. So these are sea walls, riprap, hard structures that are meant to simply stop the water coming in and flooding or eroding away the land. And you know, I don't think they look particularly nice, but some people they don't mind it, but they're definitely different. And in some cases, then they may look like a war zone when they begin to fail and other things are put in. So there might be a whole series of different things that have been tried and failed. Okay, so the two things here are that we have the knock-on impacts for the traditional approach. So one of them I just mentioned is that you have to keep building and moving along the rock armor or the hard engineering, and it costs a lot of money. Another impact here, so I'm just trying to move my thing here at the side because I can't even see what I'm looking at. Another impact is that as you build up this wall and stop water flooding in here and stop the movement of sediment to build up the land. So especially say for a wetland, you need sediments from sand and muds coming from the seaward side, or sometimes fed by a river, to build up the surface of the land. So if you stop that connection, what you have is the land begins to subside. So you get subsidence behind these walls. So that may be on this side. On this side then, because you have an urban area and maybe these are agricultural fields, you start using a lot of groundwater. And if you have excessive use of groundwater and taking water out of the ground, again, the ground level begins to go down. So you have subsidence there behind the walls. And if you think about that, even without sea level rise, if you begin to bring the land level down, it looks like sea level rise. So we call that relative sea level rise. So that's one particular issue. The other issue then is that over time, this is sea level. If you do have sea level rising, you also have to begin to build up your walls. So you're all the time increasing and maintaining those. So what happens then if there's a storm? If there's a storm, so we can imagine this is looking from above. Okay, this is from the side, a storm surge and the actual height. So this is the level of the water here, and this is the surge above that. So that extra water that comes along in a storm. But these little lines that I've put in here, these are actually looking down from above as a bird's eye view of the crests of the wave as they come in and meet the coast. So as they meet the coast here, this is the crest of the wave. They move in along here and they start to become confined by the sea walls. And here they're becoming more confined, and here. And by the time they reach in here, they're completely squashed in because they can't go anywhere because of the water. And what that does then, the knock-on effect there, is that because it's getting squashed in, it's being pushed up. So the level of the storm surge is getting higher. And here you have the height of the storm surge here, and this one is quite a bit higher. So by the time this storm surge meets the city, it's actually a lot higher than it was when it actually entered this channel. So that's a real knock-on effect there of having all of this type of hard structures that doesn't allow water over. So then if we look at the nature-based solutions, how would these look different? What could we do to do this in a different way and work with the processes? Here's an example then of what you could do. So the actions that have taken place in this hypothetical scenario is that you've broken down the defenses, you've breached the defenses at different points. So here you've taken away a section, here you've taken away a longer section, and you've completely taken them away from this wetland here. So that's breaching of and taking away the defenses. In this area here, then you've actively restored the wetland, and the same in this area here. Whereas this wetland that had been degraded, you leave it to its own devices. It was in a bad state, but you just take away the defenses, and active restoration mightn't be needed. So what that does then is, and I'll talk about the reefs in a second. What that does then is as waves approach, so here's the same waves approaching. These were the waves that were approaching from a storm. And rather than building up as they go through and getting confined and building up, what they actually do is they start leaking out to the sides. So the wave crest, the physical water starts to leak out to the sides into these wetlands. And here you have it happening all across here. And as the waves move across, they're losing water and losing energy the whole time. And so if you look at this, the storm surge, it has been reduced at this point. Here's the original. It has been reduced here, and as you move further in along, it's down to very minimal level by the time it reaches the urban area. Of course, the actual hydrodynamics of this is a little bit different, but that's just a simplified version of it for now. And here's an example of that occurring in reality. Now, this obviously isn't a wetland, but it's a harbor, but it's the same process. So here you have large swell waves, in this case, passing this point. And as they pass the point, the wave itself begins to leak away into this shadow zone here and lose energy. And you can see this quite clearly then here, that these waves look, even from this picture, quite a lot smaller than these ones out here. There are friction will take energy out of the waves as well, but this is a really good effect here for taking them out. So what we're doing is we're stretching out the wave and reducing the wave height. So then if we look at the reefs, what's the idea behind putting the reefs in here? And what are reefs? The idea is that the reefs are things that are put on the seabed, or they grow on the seabed. So you can imagine a rocky reef. People probably have a better idea of what a rocky reef is. It's a rocky outcrop that the wave pass over as it comes onto the shore. So these can be made up of lots of different things. Here we have two examples here, and in terms of nature-based solutions, probably one of the most common ones to date has been the use of oyster reefs. So this is a natural one up here on the top left, and this is a man-made one. So you build a physical structure, you put the oysters on it, and then they begin to grow on that structure. And the other ones, these are examples of wetlands. And here's our Mulranny picture. These are wetlands, and so they can be at the side, like we showed in the picture of the coastal setting, where they're on the sides of where the water is flowing, but they can also be directly in front of towns and whatever you're trying to protect. And this is another wetland down here. Other things that are good at taking energy out of the waves by when the wave goes over it, it's dragging along the bottom more if there's a rougher surface. So these cause roughness on the surface. Are kelp. So this is particularly appropriate for Ireland. We have kelp. You know, most people don't see kelp in this light because usually we see it when the tide is out and it's all lying flat. But when the tide comes in, it looks a lot more like this. And so waves passing over these lose a lot of energy. And these ones here are seagrasses, and we have seagrasses around the coast of Ireland. But probably in the Mediterranean, seagrasses habitats are a lot more important. So just some other examples, and this is kind of more the science behind it. I'm not going to go into this one. The next one the next click of my mouse will show this more clearly, but these are just examples. So this is mangroves. So in tropical climates, mangroves are very common, or they were, and so they're being restored in some areas. These are seagrasses, and these are coral reefs. But I'll give this example to explain this a bit more. So these are oyster beds, and this is a degraded or dead bed in some cases. They're completely gone on the seabed in front of New York. Seemingly historically there was a lot of oysters and oyster reefs there, and over a few hundred years they've been nearly completely cleared out. And so the effect of this is that if you look at this little symbol here, this is wave energy. So the longer the arrows here, the more the wave energy is. And you can see at the lower part of it, it's less because it's dragging along the bottom. So as this wave energy passes over this dead or degraded oyster beds, you don't have any reduction in the energy. So this arrow is the same length as this arrow, and so on down the profile to the seabed. And so you have the energy passing over here, the energy needs to do something, so it starts churning up the sea and the sediments here and probably move them offshore. So you have erosion taking place here at the coast. Whereas if you have a nice reef and something to take the energy out of the waves as they pass over the top, you can see this very clearly. So the arrows here are much reduced on this second set. So the wave passes over, a lot of energy is taken out. Then maybe if you had some seagrass or kelp inside of this again, it would be reduced even more. And what happens then when you take energy out of the wave, so waves are moving sand and sediment all the time. Once it gets to this position here and it's lost a lot of its energy, it'll just, the sand and the sediment will settle out of it and it would accumulate here at the coast. So you get buildup of sediment and a beach forming here where there was none here. And this then acts as a buffer when storms come. So when a storm comes in, this water level might be increased, but when it begins eroding, it actually has something to erode before it reaches whatever you have of value here. So the beach may act as a buffer and coastal protection in front of your valued property or hotel or whatever the case may be. In New York, they have a project started to reintroduce all these oysters and these reefs right across the seabed in front of New York. And it's called the Billion Oyster Project. Very straightforward. It does what it says on the can. So if we go back to this diagram here, these are the reefs here, and they're placed in areas where the waves have to pass over and they take the energy out of the waves. So again, they can be made up of any of these different components. So let me move on to the example of the beach and the dune. So again, we're looking at working with the natural processes. In the top one here, we'll see what this looks like. Sorry, this is stopped. We'll see what this looks like. So this is the traditional approach, and we'll just have a few pictures here to see what this looks like. So there's nothing here on the approach. In some places they do have engineered breakwaters as well, but on this particular diagram, there's none. So when a wave approaches here, there's nothing to break up the energy of the wave. And so the full force of the wave is met right on the coastline. These things here then are called groins, and they're what the thinking behind these are, they stop the sand moving along the coast and being lost from this particular place. So they're put in place to stop longshore sediment transport. And here's just an example from Salt Hill. So you can see them building up here, and then just past the groin, there's not as much. And then as you get to the next groin, there's more. And here we have an example of a seawall where the seawall has been built in this position between the beach. This is the beach here, and these are the dunes. So it's been built between the two of them. So the groin stops sand moving in this direction, and the seawall stops sand moving in this direction, cross shore. And now to some of the knock-on effects here. So as you, these are groins here, and these are seawalls here, and some of the knock-on effects here are very well understood, and anybody that has any experience with these types of structures will be able to tell you this, that it changes the way waves interact with the coast. And so you have the wave energy rather than all being concentrated here. It actually increases the amount of wave energy just down from the physical structures. So what you get is increased erosion. So while you may stop erosion of the land here, you increase it down the coast. And so, you know, you have to think about the decision that was made here and to defend this particular area and not the part down the coast. are they thinking about the knock-on effects? In many cases, you will have high value areas being defended, and areas down the coast then aren't. Much like the idea of flooding in a river system, where you're moving the water away from high value areas to lower value areas. But then the people in what are considered the lower value areas, they definitely wouldn't agree, because that's their area and they value it highly. But these types of things often aren't taken into consideration when these solutions are being implemented. So that's the downdrift effects. Sorry, the other effect here is not just the way the waves interact with this, but you're also stopping sediment moving down here. So you're stopping sediment building up on the coast along here to protect this area as well. So there's two parts to that. And here we have a seawall and rock armor in front of it. And what happens then when a storm or waves come in and they hit this structure, they're usually directed back seaward at the bottom of at the seabed. So the waves are coming in here, they crash against the wall, the energy is reflected and pushed back out here. And as the water is returning out to sea as an undercurrent, an undertow, it's taking the sand with it. And so what happens is you get the beach lowering down in front of these structures. So anybody that lives in coastal villages along Ireland, they'll be very aware that at high tide, places like Lynch or Strand Hill, that at high tide, you don't have a beach. You only have a beach at low tide, whereas once there would have been a beach at high tide as well. So it strips the sand and lowers the beach. Okay, so the two effects then are stopping the sand moving or being exchanged, and altering how the waves and the energy is distributed. So if we look at the example here of nature-based solutions, first we just look at how it compares to the traditional approach. In the traditional approach, because you have stopped the sand moving across in a cross-shore direction, there's no sand to replenish the dunes. And so the width of the dunes and the volume of the dunes are much reduced. And here in a natural setting where you do have replenishment, the dunes are big, wide features and may grow to great heights, depending on how much sand is available. And the beach itself then, not alone is it kind of be lower down in front of these walls, but it's usually very narrow as well. So you have, in a natural setting, you'll have wider beaches. So that's as a result of interrupting the sediment transport on the coast. So here's a few pictures to show that this is very important. The sand, the fact that the sand is able to move between the seabed, the beach and the dunes, and not just in one direction onshore, that it also moves offshore as well. So here's this is a beach on the north coast of Ireland, and it's a good healthy beach. So you have a big wide beach here. Here's the high tide line. So even when the tide is in, you have a healthy width of a beach here. The dunes here are embryo dunes, so these might go up during the season, and then during a winter storm event, maybe these get eroded, or sometimes they may last 2 or 3 years and build up into bigger dunes. And then you have this big dune system behind it, up to a height of, in this particular scenario, 10 or 12 meters in height. So they're very big barriers to coastal storms. Now, if you just look at this survey staff here, it's 2 meters in height. So when we look at in this particular winter, there was a number of storms. What year was that? 2004, maybe 2004, 2005. There was a number of storms, and they came in and they eroded the beach. And then because the beach was lower, they eroded the dunes. And the amount of erosion, you're talking about 4 meters in vertical height and back about the 4 or 5 or 6 meters as well, all in one winter. But the following summer, a lot of that sand moved back onshore. So here's the beach again. The following summer, the beach has built back up. Some of the sand has blown up into the front part of the dune, and it hasn't blown up into the dune because it's too vertical. It will need more sand before it can do that. But it's essentially been recovered, or there's the possibility that it's recovered if the sand has just been moved offshore. And if we look at that in terms of a diagram, here's our dune system, here's the beach. As a storm comes on, here's the storm water level. It erodes the beach and the dune, and it moves that sand offshore. And then during the summer months, the waves, smaller waves, but waves are all the same, waves are good. They move the sand back onshore and create this wide berm. So the beach here is very wide compared to this one up here. So you can see that this is called a recovering profile. So it's recovering. And this may take, in some cases, a number of days. In other cases, it may take a number of months, or maybe a season or two. But the sand has come back onshore, and you have recovery. So the volume of sand might be the same that has come back onshore. So if you think about this in terms of if you had something of value in the background, agricultural fields, houses, a village or whatever, the dune has done its job. The erosion of the dune is part of the natural process, but essentially the dune and the beach have done their job in protecting the hinterland. So erosion is a natural process, and we just need to understand that sometimes it's not all doom and gloom. It can actually come back naturally. But our problem is this part. So while it may only take a number of months or weeks for this sand to come back onto the beach and replenish the beach, for it to go back and form a dune takes a lot longer. And the reason for that is that you need these species to grow. So some of these are embryo dune species. They grow on this part of the front part of the dune, and then others grow on the dune itself when it builds up. And in order for plants to grow, you need nutrients, you need rainfall, you need the seeds, you need all of these things to come together. You need people to stay off the dune so that they're not trampled, although they're very specialized in that they can survive in this harsh environment. They are actually quite fragile, and trampling can be a problem. So for this part to take place, for the sand to move back and form the dune, may take a number of years, and in some places it may take 10 years, and has been reported to take that long. Where there has been no human activity, just purely natural processes, it can take that long. So in the time that you require for that to happen, what may happen is you lose your sand before you actually have time for it to build up in the dune. So in this scenario, it's lost through the dune, and we term it lost because it's very difficult for it to come back from this position. It's easy enough here, you have waves to bring it back, but if it goes through the dune, it's essentially lost from the dune system. So this is what that might look like. So here's an eroded dune face. The sand has arrived back on the beach after a number of months. It's blown up here into the face of the dune, but there's gaps in the dune, and this is where it may blow through the dune. So if we just take a step back, you can see where these gaps are in the dune, and the wind blows it along here and then up through the dune, and it's lost into this back area here. And in this particular example, it's blocking a road and causing a hazard on the road. But for dune recovery, the problem is it has been lost. So even though the sand returned, you don't have it. The other problem is, like I mentioned, trampling might be an issue or whatever, but there's also things like quad biking. People like the quad bike, especially up and down the front of dunes. It's a lovely place for recreation. And then you also get, and still in Ireland, even though it's illegal, you get sand mining off the beaches. So this is a few kids playing around, but it's when the real trucks and the diggers arrive that cause the problem. So we're not being killjoys here and saying the kids can't play on the dunes. Okay, and so the other problem may be that in that time that it takes for this to come back and to grow again, you might have another storm or another series of storms, and so you lose your sand back out to the sea again. So it takes, you know, a bit of luck and a bit of time for all of the things to work for it to naturally grow back. So because it takes time to do it naturally, is there something that we can do to help it along? And so this is where some of these, where what people would think of as nature-based solutions, it's actually us giving a helping hand maybe to these natural processes of sediment transport and habitat growth. So in this scenario, we don't actually have to do anything. So oftentimes simply standing back and letting nature do its thing is that's the solution. But unfortunately, that can also, there can be problems with that because of people's perceptions. So in this particular case, this is the promenade in Salt Hill and the dunes building up here over time. But as people are walking by, they mightn't understand that this is actually intentional to let it build up. They might see it as, oh, the beach isn't being managed, or it's being let go, or nobody's caring for the beach. So there is work to be done in bringing people on board and getting a combined sense of what's going on, and maybe, you know, putting up some signage to say, you know, these are the types of plants we have, these are the species that live in these plants, this is the way the sand moves around, and people get interested and come along for the journey then. So then moving from just standing back to giving a helping hand, here's an example of other things we can do. So this is planting grass species on the unvegetated surfaces. And here's some more here, and here's some bales being put in the gaps. And then we have some sand fencing over here. And what these do then is when the sand is blowing along, again, like the water in the storm being confined into a space, it actually gains energy as it's being confined into a space. So these blowouts and gaps cause a lot of erosion and a lot of sand movement. And what you're doing here is you're reducing the airflow, the speed of the air moving the sand. And because you're reducing the airflow, the sand settles out and begins to accumulate and build up around these obstacles to the airflow. So whether that's plants or bales or fencing, these are all good things to help the dune build back up and give it time to recover. The other thing that they do then as well, like things like fencing and bales, is they show people that maybe you shouldn't come into this area and act as some sort of barrier for people coming in and people using the area. Again, using signage and getting communities involved and user groups and anybody that has a stake in this is very important, because if you don't bring people along on these types of journey, what you do is people come along, they won't know what the heck the fence is there for, other than it's in their way. They'll trample it down and they'll just go off and use the dune. So it takes a lot of work and a lot of time to get to the point where these are effective. And then the kind of further end of the scale is that you actually give it a real helping hand by bringing in the diggers. So here we have a mega sand nourishment. So these types of things here are sand nourishment, where you get sand from a certain area, what is called a borrow area. You never really return it, so I don't know why it's called borrowing. And wherever you get it from, there's impacts on, because it's usually from the seabed, and the seabed is a habitat as well, and things live there. So, you know, there are impacts on these, and that's why you kind of start moving into, well, there are knock-on effects to these, even though you are still trying to work with natural processes. So in this particular one, the sand is all built up in one area. It's pumped on like this into one area, and then that they let the natural processes distribute it out along the beach and into the dunes. So the waves bring it along here, and then the wind blows it in the dunes rather than pumping it directly onto the beach, as happens in many cases. So this is a new way of thinking about this. And then you kind of get off that this is the scale of not doing very, not having to do very much, given a little helping hand, using the diggers, and then you're back into an area of, other approaches that maybe aren't the best for nature. So I hope you've seen there that nature, can be a solution. And I think anyway that it looks a lot better than traditional approaches, but it doesn't just do the coastal protection and the preventing flooding and looking after us during storms. We get so much more from these habitats and having these habitats. Now, don't try and read this. I can barely read it. I think I might need glasses. I can barely read it on my screen, but I'll just move through them quickly. So from habitats and the natural systems, we get raw materials and things like that. I've mentioned the coastal protection and what that can do. We can also get some of these habitats, especially things like the kelp and the reefs, are great for maintaining fisheries and having nursery areas where the young fish grow up before they move out into the open ocean. Nutrient recycling, tourism and recreation. People want to come to these places and visit them and spend their time there. So that's for that example there is just coral reefs. This one here is seagrass. Again, a good nursery area. For the seagrasses, you also have, it locks in carbon, so it's a good mitigation against climate change as well. You also have water purification from these kelps and salt marshes and dunes, and so there's a huge amount of other things that we get for free from these habitats. And that's also one of the problems, that it is for free, that things you get for free probably aren't valued as much as they should be. So that's one of the things we have to work on. So just to summarize some of the key points, nature-based solutions, the absolute essence of it is we're working with nature, we're not trying to control nature. And in doing that, what we're using has a large living component. So some of the examples from the US, all along the east coast of the US, they have a whole database of projects, and those projects are called living shorelines. They don't call them nature-based solution shorelines, they call them living shorelines. So there's a strong, living habitat component to these. So they're good at reducing wave energy and storm energy and preventing flooding. By and large, restoring habitats will be a big part of it. They build, because we are working with the processes, working with the sediment moving around the coast and the sand moving around the coast, it can build up. And so if we let that happen, it can build up, and that's a good thing then to act as a buffer. But they need space, so they need more space than traditional approaches. There's no doubt about that. So that's something we have to think about, and they need time. So we have to think about more long-term solutions, and they have many natural benefits. So when we move on then to, well, what are some of the issues with these and trying to implement them? There are a lot. So these are just a few of the things that I'm mentioning here, but there are a lot. So some of the barriers are that traditional mindset where we're looking for easy fixes and quick fixes and easy to sell fixes, and only thinking of small components of an area, like a reach of a river, one section of a river, or one part of the coast. That's definitely a problem, rather than thinking about the entire landscape, the landscape and how the communities within it are impacted, and how they need, what they need for a, you know, a future in that particular area. The need for space and time is a real issue, especially in places like Ireland, where there's a really strong connection to the land, and converting the land into productive, into productivity and agricultural productivity. So we spent a lot of time, and the approach in Europe, the common agricultural policy, still is all about production. So the single farm payment is about having productive land. So things that seem not to be productive and that we haven't valued properly, like wetlands, dunes, and things like that, it's very difficult to try and change and reward people that want to change and use those ecosystem services that we get. So that's a problem. There's a lack of evidence to date. There's huge amount of evidence of the impacts of traditional approaches, but yet the nature-based solutions, most of the evidence so far is about wetlands. So these other things like how kelp and how these reefs may work, and where they are appropriate and in what settings, how best to use beaches and dunes, and a lot of these, we need to build up our evidence. And that takes time, because these things, they work over a long time scale, and that's where the return on investment is working over the longer time scales. It takes time to monitor and build up that database. So it's not an easy thing to do overnight. There's a lack of experience and expertise on using nature-based solutions, but also on integrated management techniques. So where we say we need to involve communities and what they think of the future. Again, back to Mulranny, that's a very good example of where the community came together with the local authority, with, you know, experts in different fields and people with experiences and different skill sets, and they all came together, came up with a vision, and once they had a plan, then they were able to implement it, because the people that normally make the decisions were involved in it as well. So these integrated management techniques, they're something new as well, and we don't have people in decision-making positions right now that have a huge amount of experience in this. So this is the point where I sell the geographers. Geographers are great at this. So anybody wants to do a degree in geography, hopefully you'll get a job in the future in this type of position, where you look at the multiple perspectives and different types of solutions rather than just one single approach. And there's a lack of awareness about ecosystems, habitats, what they give us, and also how to value that. So we might be aware of, some people might be aware of it, but then actually how to value it and integrate that into decisions is another problem. But if you think back to some of the things that I've been talking about, and accept that complex problems, you may actually need complex answers, and things that take time and a lot of people to work together to solve them. If you think about that, on a path to the future, using these new and innovative types of solutions, that you will go down paths where things don't particularly work well, and you have to loop back around again, reassess, monitor, see, come up with indicators of what success looks like, and go again and come up with alternative paths. So you need to be flexible and adaptive. And we need to be adaptive just in the way we use our coast and our understanding of the coast. So integrating communities into that is a great way, because they're the ones living in these locations, and they know a heck of a lot about the past and what worked in the past and what has worked in could work in the future, and what they value. And so integrating all of these things is very important. And if we think about all of that, we do actually have a framework in which to work, to use all of these different components. And it's our national adaptation framework. It's our plan for dealing with climate change. We go all the way back to the start where I said, you know, the climate change was the issue here, or is one of the major issues facing us today. Well, we do have a plan for that. We may not have it for the coast. Oh, I think I forgot to mention that on the issues slide. One of the biggest issues we have in Ireland is we have no plan for the coast. So there were things like integrated coastal zone management, where we were supposed to all come together and figure out how to manage our coasts and plan for the future. And Ireland, we just didn't do that. Many other countries in Europe did, and they have advanced plans and 5-year plans and long-term plans, and they integrate people together doing, but we never did. And so that's a real problem. People working on the coast find this all the time, that they're asked to do something, but there's no actual national plan of how we should do it. So in the absence of that, this national adaptation framework might be something we can use to do it. And it has started already. This work has started already. So the government it's been 2012, I think, was the first iteration of the adaptation policy. But we now have up and running a website that has all of the ideas and all the information that we need on climate impacts, solutions to the impacts, case studies, all of this type of stuff in one place. And that's the Climate Ireland website. So you might Google that at some stage, and there's lots of information there. We also have created regional offices to tackle this. So we have 4 regional offices, and they're called the Climate Action Regional Offices. And what they do is they're looking at how we might do this on a regional basis and bring the expertise and people together at that level for efficiencies. So rather than every county trying to do it by themselves, or communities doing it by themselves, have a regional area that you can. So you can go onto their website and look at some of they actually have some sections on coastal erosion and flooding as well. So there's a wealth of information there. So we've started this process of climate adaptation, and every county already has a climate adaptation plan drawn up. Now, there's actions in these. It's clearly set out exactly what the goals are. Probably these could have done with a bit more input from communities and stakeholders, but in fairness, they were under quite a strict timeline to get it done, in the space of a year or 6 months or something like that. But what they are is just a first iteration, a first go at doing this. So the real opportunity now for communities is to get involved in developing their own adaptation plans with the help of the local authorities, and feeding into using their plans and using the expertises and the know-how of the climate action regional offices, and developing climate action plans for your particular area. Now, in saying that, don't just think about climate action. Think about, well, we're talking about long term, so you can't just think of climate and climate impacts. You have to think about, well, if we're looking at the natural environment here and how we're managing it, we're also talking about tourism, we're talking about jobs. In order to do that, we're talking about water quality and having facilities. In order to do that, we're thinking about, well, how does that impact on X, Y, and Z? And so you begin to see how all of these things are integrated when you start looking at the long term and looking at the landscape and the communities within the landscape. So it's a really good opportunity for communities and people and stakeholders to get on board. Eugene's talk on Thursday night there's going to be a much stronger component in that talk about how we can do that. So make sure to log into Eugene's talk if you're interested in getting involved in climate action. So the last thought, and this is just purely an excuse to use one of my son's great photographs that he's taken recently. My final thought is that let's not do the same old thing. So this is Conan's picture of a pied wagtail. So let's not do the same old thing. Instead of wagging our tail, maybe we should start using our heads. Thank you very much for listening.